Hello and welcome to Politics here on France 24. This coming Saturday, Marine Le Pen will officially launch her presidential campaign in Paris. While her stated objective is to win next spring's election, her hope is actually to replicate her father's performance back in 2002 when he upset all predictions and reached the second round. To do so, his youngest daughter and successor has worked hard to transform the National Front into a quote-unquote normal party rather than the devil of French politics it has been for decades. So who is really Marine Le Pen? Is there truly a new age National Front? On the set today are two persons who have been watching Marine Le Pen carefully and thoroughly for years. Fiametta Wenner, who is the co-author of a recent biography simply titled Marine Le Pen, which was published by Grasset. And also on the set is David Clark, who's the Deputy Bureau Chief of the Agence France-Presse here in Paris. Before we get to our guest, I want to come back to a recent trip across the Atlantic by Marine Le Pen, which illustrates her strategy.
For years, the far-right National Front Party was off limits for Jews and Israelis. Its founder, Jean-Marie Le Pen, had made a name for himself with a series of controversial remarks over the Holocaust, most famously his description of gas chambers as a mere detail of the Second World War. As a result, no French Jewish leader or Israeli official wanted to meet with him. But since his daughter Marine succeeded him at the helm of the party last year, she's worked hard to neutralize their image. First on the agenda was the issue of anti-Semitism. Several months ago, she told the weekly Le Point that the Holocaust was the height of barbarity. Since then, she's tried hard to organize a trip to Israel, to no avail so far. However, during a recent visit to the US, she managed to get unprecedented FaceTime with an Israeli diplomat. Not just any diplomat, the Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, Ron Prosser. The casual meeting was meant to be private, but we sneak in anyway and watch from the sidelines. It seems the reputation of Le Pen's father doesn't bother this Israeli diplomat.
We enjoy the diversity of opinion.
According to the ambassador's spokesman, it was all just a misunderstanding. While the meeting will anger many Jews in France, for Le Pen it's something of a victory, a way for her to get her message across that she's just as respectable as her opponents.
Fiametta Wenner, this is maybe just an illustration, but how telling is it of Marine Le Pen's strategy to maybe change at least the image of the National Front?
Well, we have to remind that Jean-Marie Le Pen, her father, was having exactly the same strategy. A few weeks before the famous affair of the detail, where he said that what happened to the Jews was a detail of history, of the Second World War history, he went to United States. Well, his network were far more important than the one of Marine Le Pen, because there were Pierre Sérac, who was a member of the Moon cult, and he opened all the book notes, and he met a lot of person. He met a lot of person in the Jewish community in United States. When he came back, he was very happy, and he thought that he will speak with the CRIF, who is the head of the community in France, and that he will go to Israel. Then he made this problem of the detail. She tries exactly the same thing. She tries to go to Israel, and nobody wants to see her. She tried to speak in a Israeli radio, French-speaking Israeli radio, and during the show, she said that Iran has the right of having the nuclear power. Did she say the bomb, or did she say civil nuclear power? We didn't know. But she's, as her father, in two ways, not knowing if she has to choose between having the Jews as not friends, but let's say not enemy, on direct enemies, but also in the small groups near Marine Le Pen, there is a lot of persons who are deeply anti-Zionist, near, for example, Hafez al-Assad regime, the Syrian dictator, and also pro-Iranian. And she just said that she wanted to go to Russia to meet Putin, that she admires a lot.
Okay, but nevertheless, she did get a response from an Israel official. There was some confusion, but more broadly, just not on this point, this idea that she wants to make sure the National Front is not the devil anymore and changes the subject. Do you think it is working to a certain degree?
I think the trip to the United States showed that it's not working abroad at all. She only managed to meet briefly with one of the Republican candidates. She wasn't given any face time with anyone who's very well known in France. And when she did meet briefly in an informal event with an Israeli official, this was condemned in Israeli political circles. The ambassador now says that it was a misunderstanding, that he thought he'd been invited to an event by the French delegation at the UN, not by a politician. And rather than a victory, it almost shows how toxic the Le Pen brand still is abroad. People who don't follow French politics day by day, they just remember the big moments, and usually that was her father standing up somewhere, either in a television interview or in the European Parliament, and saying something that most people found outrageous.
Well, what about internally?
Well, internally,
she's doing rather well in the polls. She is
20% perhaps.
17. Well, that's what her father got in 2002.
Maybe it's the same 17% of French people, and so maybe there are people who didn't mind or supported what Jean-Marie Le Pen used to say, who are still voting for her. She needs to get over 20% to get into the second round. These are people, the 17% who voted for her in the past, are people who didn't mind when Jean-Marie Le Pen talked about a detail of history.
But her personality is different than her father, and so there's the personality, and then there are some issues.
She's younger. She's from a generation who born after 1968, and every person who is radically more radical than her is saying, well, it's a lost generation, we cannot do anything about her. She tries not to have too much friends who are involved in decolonization, who were involved in Second World War. She's a new generation, but when you are seeing her close friends, you are in front of young radicals on the anti-Zionist way, but also on the anti-Islam way, which are really
radicals. Which is a much bigger part of her agenda. I mean, she's talking about Islamization of France quite a lot.
It's a big part of her agenda. She's trying to change the word immigration by Islamization. It's real that she's always trying to say Islamist, so radical Islam, political Islam, that Islam, but her militants and her friends are speaking about Islam. You have to know that there is a problem in translation. A lot of persons who are translating her discourse in the United States or in Britain are translating Islamism by Islam. So she tries to stand on Islamism, but it's still radical. She confuses a lot Islam and Islamism.
But she has changed the position of the party, it seems, on some issues. For instance, defending secularism, which is known here in France as laïcité, which is a staunch...
only for Islam, because on the question...
we'll get to that. But also on issues like the free market. Her father was rather pro-free market, and she's much more leftist, if I may say, and this seems to have found some appeal, especially in a time of crisis.
Her economic program would fit in quite well with the French extreme left as well. She's an economic nationalist, she's a protectionist. She wants to quit the European Union, which is perceived here in France by many as a kind of liberal project, even if people in the UK or the US might see the European Union as somehow a socialist project. Here it is perceived as a neoliberal agenda that's coming from Brussels. She does have a slightly incoherent economic policy, which was the reason she got to meet Ron Paul, the Republican candidate, the return to the gold standard, a lot of very old-fashioned corporate state economic nationalism. But at the same time, there is a tradition in this discourse. She's talking about the evils of international speculators, which brings us back, to the plots of the banks of Goldman Sachs, the Rothschilds. It's a discourse that has been on the right for a very long time as well, and which links back to, in some ways, to the anti-Zionism.
But when you say to her, you are from the far right, she says no.
No, she says no, but Jean-Marie Le Pen says no also.
Is there a difference? Is she more moderate than her father?
No, she's not more moderate than her father.
Why is this the image she has then?
Because I think she's more young and she's a woman, and she is not doing all the same bad jokes than her father. But for example, when you see who was the followers of her father, you had some Catholic extremists, you had ultra-liberal in the French way, that means free market, you had radical nationalists, neo-Nazis and everything, royalists, pro-lifers. Her friends are more small. She's mostly friend with who we call la troisième voie. They don't want
third way.
The third way. They don't want capitalism. They don't want communism. Some of them are.
But that's a change, as you just pointed out.
Yes, but it's more small. She's more radical. She's not having any discourses with the Catholics, with the royalists, with the pro-life. She's more radical. She's in a more small market, if you want. She's more popular in the French society, but on her basis, on her grassroots, she's more radical.
Do you think her strategy is working? Because the National Front has done rather well in recent local elections, cantonal, as they say, and she herself made a point of finding a point of anchorage in the north of France, in a small, industrial town. It's not that industrial anymore. But there is this notion that the National Front is maybe also gaining in areas of France where it was not present.
She is obviously getting a lot of time on television. There's a lot of books being written about her, and
you can see a sample of the books that are coming out.
Electoral base seems to be pretty solid in some areas of the country, but under the French political system, unless you have a majority in parliament, unless you have an elected president, you don't wield national power. And she hasn't yet reached the tipping point where you could imagine one of the mainstream parties going into coalition with her. There are people within.
Is this her objective? Because there's a lot of talk that the National Front was always a kind of an island, that it was off limits because the other parties didn't want it, but also because the National Front had its interest in being seen as discriminated.
She often condemns the UMPS, the mixing the names of the two mainstream parties, to say that.
But is she now trying to maybe build a coalition, a broader coalition, to get out of that isolation?
I don't know. Would you say she's trying to do that? Would you kid herself if she was able to do that?
It's very strange because she wants to speak with radical right when they are in coalition. She wants to speak with Jobbik in Hungary, who are very radical. But herself, I don't see her having the interest in going to UMP, which is a right wing, because she will lose everything. What is important for Marine Le Pen is trying to make her, let's say, little enterprise work well.
But isn't she willing to win? And not only have her, her small party and so on. Isn't she more ambitious? Isn't she maybe trying to kill the UMP if she doesn't ally with them?
She's going. She wants to kill the UMP to be the right wing, but I don't think she wants a coalition with the UMP. She will be very happy if some members of the UMP join her in a new party, for example, but a party where she will be the leader. She will never suppress all the good things that she has in her own party to be to have a minister for 6 months or 1 year. It's completely uninteresting.
I can't imagine her sitting around the cabinet table with.
No, she's not able to do that anymore because she has everything as a chief of party. We are not a country of national coalitions and of national unity. We're a party of majority. She would be very happy to be the president of her own party and to have ministers from right wing, but she will not sell everything to have that.
If the things continue as they have done so far in France, although we should have one eye on the bond markets, the extreme right has just entered the government in Athens and a coalition across the board because they have a government of national unity there now. So far, the French economy is not at that state, but 1.7 trillion in debt. And the crisis itself plays into her hands because it feeds her narrative that France has been let down by Europe and the borders are open and that needs to refine its strength by becoming a nationalist country again.
Just the last point, if I may say, in your book you mention how important it is for her to rehabilitate the image of the Le Pen name or brand. Really, how much of a factor is it in her efforts?
It's complicated on her life, because if she wants to rehabilitate her father, she has to suppress the past of the party, and it's what she's trying to do. Each time somebody is writing on her or filming things, or, for example, in documentary trees, sorting old pictures, she's suing. There is maybe 15
including
or 16,
you,
including us, 15 or 16 sue against an old president of the republic, against everyone, because she wants to be the only one to write the history of her party, to put a new image.
Is it the relationship with her father? Is it complicated for her to navigate? He's still there, although she's the official head of the party.
Well, she's never repudiated him. She still appears with him in public, and she still defends him. If she's moved her own discourse along, that's one thing. But as you said, she can't get rid of that past, and she can't do that without killing her father. And she doesn't seem to want to. She's taking over his party, and it seems to be the Le Pen family name that she wants to revive, not just her own.
Right. Last question. Do you think she will make it to the second round of the election, if you had to bet today?
I think it's a possibility that she can make it, because we have a deep crisis, and we are a few months before the election, and a few months before the election in 2002, we was not having so much score.
I wouldn't have said so a few months ago, but I attended a dinner in Paris recently at which she spoke, and I think she'll be an impressive campaigner. I think because she's very clever at not answering questions and very forceful speaker, and there's a lot of stressed people out there, a lot of rising unemployment. I think she'll do quite well, and I think both of the UMP and the Socialist Party candidate should have one eye out behind them come the first round next year.
Okay, we'll see how all this unfolds and how Marine Le Pen fares. She's launching her presidential campaign this weekend, and we'll probably have other occasions to discuss her destiny. Thank you to both of you, and thank you for watching Politics here on France 24.